The red sun hung low in the sky as the last transport ship prepared to leave. Its engines hummed with power, kicking up dust across the barren landing pad. Inside, people rushed to secure their belongings, their faces tight with worry. No one spoke about the small figure watching from behind a stack of empty cargo containers. Jia Kim hugged her knees to her chest, making herself as small as possible. She was 12 years old, small for her age, with dark hair cut short for practicality. Her eyes, wide and observant, followed the adults as they hurried past. No one looked her way. "Final boarding call," announced a mechanical voice. "All personnel must report to the main deck. Launch sequence initiates in 10 minutes. Jia knew she should stand up. She should run to the ship and tell someone she was still here. But fear kept her frozen in place. The colony director had made it clear yesterday. There was no room for non-essential personnel. And an orphan with no special skills was definitely non-essential. "They'll find another place for you in the next transport," the director had said, not meeting her eyes. "Just wait here," but there was no next transport. Jia had overheard enough to know this was the last ship. The mining operation on Nexus 7 had failed. The rare minerals they sought were too deep, too difficult to extract. The company had cut its losses. The ship's ramp began to rise. Panic shot through Jia's body. She jumped to her feet. "Wait!" she called, her voice lost in the roar of the engines. "I'm still here, wait!" She ran toward the ship, waving her arms. A worker near the ramp looked her way, eyes widening in recognition. For a moment, Jia thought he would stop the launch. Instead, he turned away, pretending not to see her. The ramp sealed shut. The engines flared bright blue. Jia fell back as the hot blast of air hit her face. She watched, helpless, as the ship rose into the sky, becoming smaller and smaller, until it was just a dot against the red clouds. Then it was gone. Silence fell over the abandoned mining colony, the kind of silence that made your ears ring, searching for any sound to latch onto. Jia stood alone on the landing pad, a small bag of her possessions clutched in one hand. "They left me," she whispered, the words hanging in the still air. "They really left me." The truth of her situation sank in slowly, like cold water seeping into her bones. She was alone on a hostile planet. No food shipments would come. No medical supplies. No help of any kind. Jia had been abandoned before, first by parents she barely remembered, who had signed her over to the colony program when she was 5, then by a series of reluctant guardians within the colony, each passing her along to someone else when she became inconvenient. But this abandonment was different. This was final. The sun was setting fast. Nexus 7 had short days and long, freezing nights. Jia knew she needed shelter before darkness fell. The temperature would drop below freezing within hours. She turned toward the main colony building. It was a large, ugly structure of metal and plastic, designed for function rather than beauty. Inside would be whatever the colonists couldn't take with them. Furniture too big for the ships. Equipment too heavy to justify the fuel cost. Food stores deemed unnecessary for the journey home. Jia walked quickly, her footsteps echoing in the empty pathways. The colony had housed 300 people at its peak. Now it felt like a ghost town, with doors left open and personal items scattered about, abandoned in the rush to leave. The main doors of the colony building stood open. Jia stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dimmer light. The entry hall was a mess. Papers scattered across the floor, chairs overturned, a broken screen hanging from one wall. It looked like people had fought to get out. "Hello?" Jia called, her voice small in the large space. "Is anyone here?" No answer came. She hadn't really expected one. Jia made her way to the living quarters. She had shared a room with 3 other girls, all older, all gone now. Their room was on the 3rd floor. She took the stairs, not trusting the elevators without maintenance staff to keep them running. The room was as she had left it that morning. Her bed was made, her few possessions neatly arranged on the small shelf above it. The other beds were stripped bare, the other shelves empty. Jia set her bag down and sat on her bed, suddenly exhausted. What was she going to do? How long could she survive here alone? The colony had some automated systems. The water recyclers would keep working for a while. The backup generators would provide some power. But food would run out eventually. And if anything broke down, she had limited skills to fix it. Jia was good with computers. She could access most of the colony's systems. She knew basic first aid. She could read well above her age level. But she wasn't a doctor or an engineer or a farmer. She was just a girl who had been left behind. Tears welled up in her eyes. Gia wiped them away angrily. Crying wouldn't help. She needed a plan. First, she would check the food stores, then secure the building against the cold night. Tomorrow, she would take inventory of everything left behind. Maybe she could find a working communication system. Send a distress signal. A low rumble interrupted her thoughts. At first, Gia thought it was her empty stomach. Then the floor vibrated beneath her feet. An earthquake. Nexus 7 had them sometimes, but this felt different. More like footsteps, very large footsteps. Gia went to the window. The sun had set, leaving the landscape bathed in the eerie light of Nexus 7's 3 moons. The mining equipment cast long shadows across the barren ground. Nothing moved, then she saw it. A massive shape moving between 2 storage buildings, larger than any vehicle the colony had used. It moved with purpose, its long body flowing like water over the rough terrain. Gia gasped. The shape stopped. Then it turned, as if looking directly at her window. 2 eyes glowed in the darkness, not the reflection of light, but their own inner fire, golden and intelligent. Gia stepped back from the window, heart pounding. What was that thing? Nothing in the colony's wildlife reports mentioned creatures that big. The largest native animal documented was no bigger than a house cat. The building shook again. The creature was moving, coming closer. Gia ran to the door, then stopped. Where could she go? The colony was empty. There was nowhere to hide that the creature couldn't reach. A strange calm settled over her. If this was how it ended, at least it would be quick. Better than slowly starving to death alone. A shadow passed over the window. Gia turned to see a massive head blocking the view. Scales shimmered in the moonlight, changing colors like oil on water. The head was long and elegant, with ridges above the eyes and along the jaw. Those eyes, intelligent, curious, studied her through the glass, not a predator's gaze. Something else. Something almost kind. What are you? Gia whispered. To her shock, a voice answered in her mind. I am the last of my kind. As it seems, are you? Gia's legs gave out. She sat heavily on the floor, staring at the creature outside her window. It wasn't speaking aloud. The voice was inside her head, deep and ancient and somehow gentle. You can understand me? She asked. Yes, small one. I have watched your kind since you came to my world. I have learned your thoughts, your language. Are you going to eat me? Gia asked, surprising herself with her directness. A rumbling sound came from the creature. It took Gia a moment to realize it was laughing. No, small one. I do not eat thinking beings. And you have been wronged by your own kind. Left behind when they fled. Gia nodded, tears filling her eyes again. They abandoned me. Then we have something in common. The creature's head moved back slightly. My name in your tongue would be Day, and you are? Gia Kim. Gia Kim, Day repeated, the name flowing strangely in her mind. The night grows cold. This shelter will not protect you for long. Its systems fail even now. As if to prove the point, the lights flickered overhead. Come, said Day. I can offer better shelter. A place where your kind has never been. Gia hesitated. Go with a strange creature she had just met. But what choice did she have? Stay and slowly die as the colony's systems failed? How do I know I can trust you? She asked. You don't, Day replied simply. But I have watched your people destroy my world for years, yet I offer you help. Does that not suggest my intentions? Gia considered this. Then she stood up, grabbed her bag, and walked to the window. How do I get out? This doesn't open wide enough. Step back, Day instructed. Gia moved away from the window. With surprising gentleness, Day pressed one massive clawed foot against the wall. The building groaned, then the entire window frame popped free, falling to the floor with a crash. Cold air rushed in. Gia shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. Come, Dee said again, lowering his head to the opening. The night brings death to those unprepared. Taking a deep breath, Gia climbed onto the windowsill. Day's head was right there, close enough to touch. Up close, his scales were even more beautiful, shifting between deep blue and purple in the moonlight. Climb onto my neck, Day instructed. Hold tight to the ridges there. Gia reached out a trembling hand and touched Day's scales. They were warm, surprisingly smooth. She climbed carefully onto the creature's neck, finding a secure spot between 2 large ridges. I'm ready, she said, though her voice shook. Then we go, Day replied, pulling away from the building. As they moved into the night, Gia looked back at the abandoned colony. The place that had been her home, the people who had left her behind. Then she turned forward, facing the unknown with her strange new protector. For the first time since the ships left, Gia felt something other than fear. She felt hope. Day moved across the wasteland with surprising grace for such a large creature. Gia held tight to the ridges on his neck, her small fingers finding secure holds between the shifting scales. The night air was cold against her face, but the dragon's body radiated heat like a furnace. "Where are we going?" Gia asked, her voice nearly lost in the wind. "To my home," Day replied in her mind. "It is not far." The landscape changed as they traveled. The flat, barren ground of the mining colony gave way to rocky hills. Gia had never been this far from the colony. The miners had mapped only the areas with valuable minerals, ignoring the rest of the planet. "I didn't know there were mountains here," Gia said, looking at the tall peaks ahead. "Your people saw only what they wanted to see," Day answered. "They came for what lies beneath the ground, not what lives upon it." The dragon climbed higher into the hills. The 3 moons of Nexus 7 lit their path with silver-blue light. Gia could see better now. The ground wasn't as dead as it appeared from the colony. Small plants grew between rocks, their leaves dark and tough. Tiny creatures scurried away as day approached. "Life," Gia whispered. "The scientists said nothing could live on the surface." "Another thing they were wrong about," Day said. "Life finds a way, even in harsh places." They reached a cliff face that rose straight up from the ground. It looked solid, with no openings Gia could see. Day stopped in front of it. "We are here," he announced. Gia looked around in confusion. "Where? I don't see anything." "Not all doors are meant to be seen by human eyes." Day raised one clawed foot and pressed it against the rock. The stone rippled like water. Then, to Gia's amazement, it parted, revealing a dark tunnel large enough for the dragon to enter. "How did you do that?" Gia gasped. "My kind shaped this world long before yours discovered it," Day explained, stepping into the tunnel. "We built our homes to be hidden from those who would harm us." The stone closed behind them, sealing out the night. Gia expected darkness, but the tunnel walls began to glow with a soft blue light. The light came from small crystals embedded in the rock, illuminating their path. "It's beautiful," Gia said, reaching out to touch the glowing wall. "Be careful," Day warned. "The crystals respond to life energy. Too much contact can drain your strength." Gia quickly pulled her hand back. The tunnel sloped downward, taking them deep into the mountain. The air grew warmer as they descended. After several minutes of walking, the tunnel opened into a vast cavern. Gia's mouth fell open in wonder. The cavern was enormous, its ceiling so high she could barely see it. More of the glowing crystals covered the walls and ceiling, creating a false sky of blue and green stars. A lake of clear water filled the center of the cavern, its surface perfectly still, reflecting the lights above. Around the lake stood structures unlike anything Gia had ever seen. They weren't buildings exactly, but formations of crystal and stone that had been shaped into living spaces. Arches, platforms, and domes rose from the cavern floor, all connected by graceful bridges. "This is where you live?" Gia asked, her voice hushed with awe. "This was where my kind lived," Day corrected. "Now only I remain." The dragon moved toward the largest formation near the lake. It was a dome-shaped structure with multiple openings, large enough to accommodate Day's massive body. "You may climb down now," Day said, lowering his head to the ground. Gia slid carefully from the dragon's neck, her legs wobbly after the long ride. The floor beneath her feet was smooth stone, polished to a shine. It was warm to the touch, as if heated from below. "Are you hungry?" Day asked. Gia nodded. She hadn't eaten since morning, before the evacuation began. "Come," Day said, leading her into the dome structure. Inside, the space opened up even more. The ceiling rose in graceful arcs, supported by columns of crystal that glowed from within. The floor dipped in the center, forming a nest-like depression filled with soft, fibrous material that looked like moss but felt like silk. Day moved to one side of the room, where a pool of water bubbled up from the ground. Next to it stood a stone shelf covered with various objects. The dragon picked up a round purple fruit with his claws and offered it to Gia. "This is safe for humans to eat," he said. "Sweet but nourishing." Gia took the fruit cautiously. It felt heavy in her hands, its skin smooth like an apple. She bit into it, juice running down her chin. The taste was indeed sweet, but with a tangy aftertaste that reminded her of oranges. "It's good," she said, taking another bite. "Thank you." Day watched her eat with those intelligent golden eyes. When she finished, he offered her water in a bowl-shaped crystal. The water was cool and clean, better than the recycled water at the colony. With her hunger and thirst satisfied, exhaustion hit Gia like a wave. She swayed on her feet, struggling to keep her eyes open. "You need rest," Day observed. "Use the nest. It will keep you warm." Gia looked at the depression in the floor. It did look comfortable. She climbed in, sinking into the soft material. It molded around her body like a perfect mattress. Warmth surrounded her, chasing away the chill of the night. "Why are you helping me?" Gia asked, her voice heavy with approaching sleep. Day settled his massive body around the edge of the nest, his long tail curling protectively around Gia's small form. "I have watched your colony since it arrived," the dragon said. "I saw how they treated you. Always apart. Always last. I saw no one care for you as a young one should be cared for." Gia felt tears form in her eyes. "They didn't want me. I was just extra weight. Their loss," Day said simply. "My kind valued our young above all else. To abandon a child is unthinkable." "What happened to your kind?" Gia asked, fighting to stay awake. "Why are you the last?" A deep sadness filled Day's mental voice. "The mining. Your people dug deep into our breeding grounds, not knowing what they destroyed. The chemicals they used poisoned our eggs. The machines broke through ancient chambers where our young were growing. One by one, my kind died or left to find safer worlds." "I'm sorry," Gia whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. "You did not do this," Day said gently. "You are as much a victim as my kind. But I'm human. Like them. You are Gia," Day corrected. "You are yourself. Not them." Gia thought about this as sleep pulled at her mind. "Will you tell me more about your kind tomorrow?" "Yes, little one. Tomorrow I will show you wonders your people never saw. Now sleep." Gia closed her eyes, feeling safer than she had in years. The dragon's body radiated comforting heat, and his presence in her mind felt like a protective blanket. Just before sleep took her completely, Gia felt something unexpected. A gentle touch on her mind, like a mental caress. It carried feelings of safety, protection, and something she hadn't felt in a very long time. It felt like belonging. Gia woke to soft light and unfamiliar surroundings. For a moment, panic gripped her as she tried to remember where she was. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back. The abandoned colony, the dragon named Day, the hidden cavern beneath the mountain. She sat up in the nest looking around. Day was gone, but she could sense his presence nearby. The mental connection they had formed remained, a faint awareness in the back of her mind. Gia climbed out of the nest and stretched her arms above her head. She felt rested, better than she had in weeks. The air in the cavern was clean and slightly warm, with a mineral smell that reminded her of rain. "You are awake." Day's voice spoke in her mind. The dragon entered the dome, ducking his head through the large opening. "Did you rest well?" "Yes," Gia said, smiling. "Better than I have in a long time." "Good. There is much to show you today." Day brought her more fruit for breakfast, along with something that looked like bread, but had a nutty flavor. Gia ate quickly, curious about what the dragon wanted to show her. "First," Dee said when she had finished, "we must address your needs. You will require proper food, water, and shelter if you are to survive here." "Can't I stay with you?" Gia asked, suddenly worried. "Of course," Day assured her. "But this place was built for my kind, not yours. We must adapt it." The dragon led her through the cavern, showing her spaces she could use. There was a small room off the main dome that could become her bedroom. Another space could serve as a bathing area, with a natural hot spring bubbling up from below. "The water is clean," Day explained, filtered through layers of rock and crystal. "What about food?" Gia asked. "I can't live on just fruit. There are many plants that grow here that humans can eat," Day said. "And I can hunt for you. There are small animals in the outer valleys that provide good meat." Gia nodded, trying to take it all in. Yesterday she had been abandoned, certain she would die alone. Today, she was planning a new life with a creature straight out of Earth's oldest legends. "Can we go back to the colony?" she asked. "There are things there I could use. Tools, clothes, maybe some food." Day considered this. "It would be wise to salvage what we can. But we must be careful. Your people may have left traps or dangerous systems behind." "I know the colony systems," Gia said confidently. I can shut down anything dangerous. Then we will go, Day decided. But first there is something important I must show you. The dragon led her deeper into the cavern network, through tunnels that twisted and turned like a maze. Gia would have been hopelessly lost without Day to guide her. Finally, they entered a small chamber unlike the others. This room was perfectly round, its walls covered in symbols Gia didn't recognize. In the center stood a crystal pillar that reached from floor to ceiling, glowing with an inner light that shifted between blue and green. "What is this place?" Gia asked, her voice automatically dropping to a whisper. "This is the heart," Day said solemnly. "The last living memory of my kind. It contains our history, our knowledge, our stories." Gia approached the crystal pillar cautiously. "Like a computer?" "Similar but alive in ways your computers are not," Day explained. "It responds to thought and emotion, not just commands." The dragon moved beside her, placing one clawed foot near the base of the crystal. "Place your hand on the crystal, Gia. I want to show you something." Hesitantly, Gia reached out and touched the crystal surface. It was warm and seemed to pulse under her fingers. Suddenly, images flooded her mind. Not just pictures, but sounds, smells, feelings. A complete sensory experience. She saw Nexus 7 as it had been thousands of years ago. Green valleys, clear skies, mountains teeming with life. And dragons, hundreds of them, soaring through the air, diving into crystal-clear lakes, gathering in caverns like this one. "This was my home," Day's voice explained as the images flowed. "Before your people came. Before the mining poisoned the land. The vision shifted, showing the arrival of human ships, the first mining operations, the slow death of the planet's surface as chemicals leaked into the soil and water. The dragons retreating deeper underground, their numbers dwindling year by year." Gia pulled her hand away, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Now you understand," Day said gently. "Why I could not leave you behind. Why I must protect what remains." Gia wiped her tears away and looked up at the dragon with new determination. "I want to help," she said firmly. "I want to fix what my people broke." Day's golden eyes studied her face. "It may not be possible to undo all the damage, but we can try," Gia insisted. "You know this world. I know human technology. Together, maybe we can make things better." For the first time, Gia felt something like a smile from the dragon. Not a physical expression, but a warm feeling in their mental connection. "Together," Day agreed. "Now let us return to your colony and gather what you need. Our work begins today." As they left the heart chamber, Gia felt a new sense of purpose filling her. She had been abandoned, yes, but she had also been found. And perhaps that was exactly where she was meant to be all along. The journey back to the abandoned colony took less time in daylight. Gia rode on Day's neck, now more comfortable with the height and motion. The three suns of Nexus 7 beat down on them, making the wasteland shimmer with heat. "The colony will be hot inside," Gia warned as they approached the familiar buildings. "The cooling systems probably shut down when the power reserves got low." "I can sense active power sources," Day replied in her mind. "Some systems still function." Gia was surprised. "Really? They should have turned everything off before leaving." Perhaps they left in too much hurry to follow proper procedures. The mining colony looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, less scary. Gia could see now how cheaply it had been built, with thin metal walls and plastic windows that were already turning yellow from the harsh sunlight. Day landed in the main yard, his massive body dwarfing the human structures around them. Gia slid down from his neck, landing lightly on her feet. "I need to check the main control room first," she said. "We should make sure nothing dangerous is still running." "I will come with you," Day said, following her toward the main building. Gia paused. Can you fit through the doors?" Day made a rumbling sound that Gia now recognized as laughter. "I will wait outside, but I will keep our mind link open. Show me what you see." Gia nodded and entered the building. The air inside was stale, but not as hot as she had feared. Some of the environmental systems were indeed still working. She made her way to the control room on the second floor. The control room was a mess. Someone had tried to destroy the main computer, smashing screens and ripping out cables, but they had done a poor job of it. The backup systems were still intact, humming quietly in their protected cases. Gia sat at the least damaged console and pressed her palm against the reader. To her surprise, it lit up green. They didn't delete my access, she said to Day through their mental link. That's strange. Perhaps not everyone wanted to leave you behind, Day suggested. Gia hadn't considered that possibility. Had someone deliberately left her access active? She pushed the thought aside and focused on checking the colony systems. Most of the critical functions were in shutdown mode. Life support was minimal, just enough to keep the air breathable. Water recycling was still active, but at low capacity. Power was being generated by the emergency solar arrays, storing energy in the backup batteries. Nothing immediately dangerous, Gia reported to Day. But I found something interesting. The communication system is still active. It's set to automatic broadcast. What is it broadcasting? Day asked, his mental voice sharp with concern. Gia checked the logs. A distress signal and, wait, there's a message attached to it. She opened the message file. A video appeared on the screen. It showed the colony director, his face grim. This is Director Han of Nexus 7 Mining Colony, he said. We have evacuated due to critical resource shortages. However, we were forced to leave behind one colonist. Jia Kim, age 12, human female. She is alive and has access to remaining supplies. Any passing ships are requested to check for survivors. Repeat, one survivor remains on Nexus 7. Gia stared at the screen in shock. They didn't forget me. They left me on purpose, but they told someone I was here. They abandoned you, yet sought to ease their guilt, Day observed, his mental tone disapproving. A half measure at best. But why leave me at all? Gia wondered. There must have been room on the ships. She dug deeper into the system, searching for answers. In a protected folder, she found a set of messages between Director Han and the company headquarters. The content made her blood run cold. They're coming back, she whispered. This wasn't a permanent evacuation. They're bringing bigger equipment. They're going to mine the whole planet. Through their link, she felt Day's alarm. When? 6 months from now, Gia said, reading the details. They left me here as a claim marker. As long as one colonist remains, they maintain legal rights to the planet under galactic mining law. They used you, Day said, anger coloring his mental voice. Left a child alone to die just to keep their claim. Gia felt sick. She had been abandoned not by accident or oversight, but by cold calculation. Her life was worth less to them than mining rights. We need to stop them, she said firmly. If they come back with bigger equipment, they'll destroy everything. Your home, the heart, all of it. Yes, Dee agreed. But first, gather what you need from this place. We must prepare. Gia nodded and got to work. She downloaded all the colony data to a portable drive. Then she went to the supply rooms, filling bags with useful items. Food packets, medical supplies, tools, clothing. She found a small portable generator and added it to her pile. In the science lab, she discovered something unexpected. A case of sample containers, each holding a different type of plant seed. The colony had been testing Earth plants to see if they could grow on Nexus 7. Most had failed, but a few had thrived. Day, she called through their link. I found seeds. Plants from Earth that can grow here. Maybe we can use them to help heal the land. Bring them, Dee replied. Any tool that might restore life is valuable. Gia added the seed case to her collection. She was about to leave the lab when another item caught her eye. A small device sitting on a shelf labeled Atmospheric Analyzer. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands. It was designed to test air quality, soil composition, and water purity. The scientists had used it to monitor pollution levels around the colony. This could help us track the mining damage, she said to Day. See where the worst pollution is, and if it's getting better or worse. Good thinking, Dee approved. You have a clever mind, Gia Kim. Gia smiled at the compliment. No one at the colony had ever praised her intelligence. They had seen her only as a burden, an extra mouth to feed. After 2 hours of searching and packing, Gia had gathered everything useful she could carry. She dragged her bags to the main yard where Day waited patiently. How will we carry all this? She asked, looking at the pile of supplies. Day extended his wings, revealing a network of strong, flexible membranes. We can make a sling between my front legs. The supplies will hang below me as I fly. Together they fashioned a carrying system using ropes Gia found in the maintenance shed. When they finished, the bags hung securely beneath Day's body, with Gia riding on his neck above. Before they left, Gia had one more task. She returned to the control room and accessed the communication system. With a few commands, she changed the automatic message. What did you do? Day asked. I updated the distress call, Gia explained. Now it warns that the planet has dangerous atmospheric conditions that cause the evacuation. It says no one should land without special equipment. A clever lie, Day said approvingly. It may discourage casual visitors. It won't stop the mining company when they return, Gia admitted. But it might buy us time. As they prepared to leave, Gia took one last look at the colony. For 7 years it had been her home. Not a happy home, but the only one she knew. Now she was leaving it behind for good. Are you sad to go? Day asked, sensing her emotions. Gia thought about it. No, she decided. There's nothing for me here. Just bad memories. Then let us make better ones, Day said, spreading his wings wide. They rose into the air, the supplies swinging gently beneath them. Gia looked down as the colony grew smaller, becoming just another scar on the wasteland. Ahead lay the mountains and beneath them Day's hidden world, her new home. As they flew, Gia's mind raced with plans. 6 months wasn't much time, but it might be enough. With Day's knowledge of the planet and her understanding of human technology, perhaps they could find a way to protect this world. We'll need to monitor the old mining sites, she said to Day. See how far the damage has spread. And search for other survivors of my kind, Day added. I have long believed I am the last, but perhaps others hide in distant mountains. Do you really think there might be more dragons? Gia asked, hope rising in her chest. It is a small chance, Day admitted, but worth investigating. Gia nodded, her determination growing. We'll make a map, explore the whole planet if we have to, and we'll find a way to stop the miners from coming back. Through their mental link, she felt Day's approval and something else, pride. The dragon was proud of her courage, her quick thinking. Together, Day said, we may accomplish what neither could do alone. The wasteland stretched below them, damaged but not dead. Like Gia herself, she had been abandoned, wounded by those who should have protected her, but she had found a new protector, a new purpose. As they soared toward the mountains, Gia felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope, not just for survival, but for something more. A chance to heal, herself, Day, and perhaps even this broken world. The dragon's wing curled slightly, sheltering her from the harsh wind. Gia smiled and patted the warm scales beneath her hands. Thank you for finding me, she whispered. Day's response flowed warm through their mental link. Perhaps small one, we found each other. 1 month passed quickly. Gia settled into life with Day, turning a section of the cavern into her own living space. She used materials from the colony to build a small bedroom with a proper bed, a work area with tables and chairs, and a kitchen of sorts where she could prepare food. Day watched her work with curious eyes. Human nests are very complex, he observed one day as Gia arranged her tools on a shelf. We like our comforts, Gia replied with a smile. Though this is much nicer than my room at the colony. Each day followed a pattern. Mornings were for exploring the cavern system, with Day showing Gia rooms and tunnels that had not been used in years. Afternoons were spent working on their plans to protect the planet. Evenings were for learning, with Day teaching Gia about his kind and Gia sharing what she knew of human worlds. Today they were preparing for their first long journey away from the mountain. Gia checked her backpack one more time, making sure she had everything they might need. Water bottles, food, first aid kit, portable scanner, she counted off, and the mapping device. The mapping device was Gia's proudest creation. She had taken parts from colony equipment to build a scanner that could record terrain details and pollution levels. It would help them create a complete map of Nexus 7's surface. Are you ready? Day asked, entering the main cavern. The dragon moved with surprising grace for his size, his long body flowing like water over the stone floor. Ready, Gia confirmed, slinging her backpack over her shoulders. Where are we going first? North, Day said. There is a valley there where my kind once nested. I have not visited in many years. I wish to see what remains. Gia climbed onto Day's neck, settling into the now familiar spot between his ridge scales. They left the cavern through a different exit, one that opened onto a high cliff face. Without hesitation, Day leaped from the cliff, his wings snapping open to catch the morning air. Gia's stomach dropped at the sudden fall, then steadied as they soared upward. Flying with Day was still thrilling, even after many shorter trips around the mountain. The feeling of freedom, of seeing the world spread out below her, never got old. They flew north for several hours. The landscape changed gradually, the barren wasteland giving way to rocky hills with patches of tough vegetation. Gia used her scanner to record everything they passed over. The pollution levels are lower here, she noted, checking the readings. The mining chemicals didn't spread this far. This is good news, Dee replied. Perhaps more of the planet remains healthy than I feared. Around midday, they reached the valley Day had spoken of. From above, it looked like a deep crack in the planet's surface with steep walls and a narrow floor. A small river ran through it, glinting in the sunlight. Day circled lower, landing on a wide ledge halfway down the valley wall. Gia climbed down, stretching her legs after the long flight. This was a nesting site? She asked, looking around. The ledge was bare rock with no signs of habitation. Look closer, Day instructed. Gia examined the rock beneath her feet. Now that Day mentioned it, she could see that the surface wasn't natural. It had been smoothed and shaped, with shallow depressions carved into it at regular intervals. These were nests, she realized. For eggs? Yes, Day confirmed, a note of sadness in his mental voice. This ledge once held 20 nests. My own egg rested here, many cycles ago. Gia tried to imagine the ledge filled with dragon eggs, with adult dragons flying in and out, caring for their young. It must have been a beautiful sight. Let us check the river, Day suggested. The water here was once special, rich in minerals our eggs needed. They made their way down to the valley floor. The path was steep but showed signs of use, worn spots where countless dragon feet had traveled over the years. The river was narrow but deep, its water clear and swift-flowing. Gia knelt by the water's edge and used her scanner to test it. The results surprised her. Day, this water is clean, she said excitedly. No chemical contamination at all. And it's full of minerals, iron, calcium, and something else I can't identify. Day lowered his head to the water, his tongue flicking out to taste it. Yes, he said. It tastes as it should. The sacred elements remain. Sacred elements? What your scanner cannot identify, Day explained. A rare mineral found only in these mountains. It helped our eggs develop properly, strengthening the shells and nourishing the young inside. Gia took a sample of the water, storing it carefully in a test tube. Could this help us? If the mining company is coming for minerals, maybe this is what they want. Perhaps, Day said thoughtfully, though they seemed more interested in the deep deposits beneath the colony. They explored the valley further, with Gia scanning and recording everything. As the day progressed, she noticed something strange. Plants grew more abundantly here than anywhere else she had seen on Nexus 7. Some were even bearing fruits or flowers. The plants are thriving, she said, examining a bush with small purple berries. Is it because of the water? Yes, Day confirmed. The sacred elements nourish all life, not just dragons. In the old days, this entire valley was green and growing. Gia's mind raced with possibilities. Dee, I think I have an idea. What if we could use this water to help heal the damaged areas? If it makes plants grow here, maybe it could help them grow near the colony too. Day considered this. It is possible. But moving enough water would be difficult. We don't need to move the water, Gia said excitedly. Just the minerals in it. If I can identify the exact elements that make it special, maybe we can find a way to spread them to other areas. As they discussed the idea, Gia's scanner suddenly beeped loudly. She looked down at it in surprise. What is it? Day asked. It's detecting a power source, Gia said, frowning at the readings. Something electrical. But that's impossible. There shouldn't be anything man-made out here. She adjusted the scanner, trying to pinpoint the source. It seemed to be coming from further up the valley, perhaps a kilometer away. We should investigate, Day decided. It could be important. They followed the scanner's readings, moving deeper into the valley. The signal grew stronger as they walked. Finally, they rounded a bend in the river and stopped in shock. Ahead of them stood a small building. It was clearly of human design, with metal walls and a flat roof. Solar panels covered the roof, glinting in the sunlight. A satellite dish pointed skyward from one corner. A research station, Gia whispered. But the colony records never mentioned any outposts this far north. It appears well maintained, Day observed. Not abandoned like the colony. Gia approached cautiously, scanner held out in front of her. The readings showed the building was powered and had active systems running inside. A keypad lock secured the door. Someone could still be here, she said nervously, or it might be automated. I sense no human presence, Day said, his mental voice certain. But there is something alive inside. Something small. Gia examined the keypad. It was a standard colony model, one she was familiar with. She tried the default access code used for maintenance buildings. To her surprise, the door clicked open. Stay close to me, Day warned as Gia pushed the door open. The interior was a single room, filled with scientific equipment. Computer screens lined one wall displaying data and images. Sample containers sat on shelves, each carefully labeled. In the center stood a large tank filled with clear liquid, and swimming in the tank was a creature unlike anything Gia had seen before. About the size of her hand, it looked like a miniature dragon with tiny wings and a long, sinuous body. Its scales shimmered with iridescent colors as it moved through the water. "Day," Gia gasped. "What is that?" The dragon had gone completely still, his golden eyes fixed on the tank. When he spoke in her mind, his voice was filled with wonder and disbelief. "It is a hatchling," he said. "A dragon child in its first form. But how? I thought you were the last." "So did I," Day replied, moving closer to the tank. "This should not be possible." Gia looked around the room, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Her eyes fell on a journal lying open on a desk. She picked it up and began to read. "Day, listen to this," she said. "Day 112. The embryo continues to develop normally. The mineral solution from the river provides all necessary nutrients. If my calculations are correct, we should see hatching within the next month. The company would destroy this discovery if they knew. Their mining operations take priority over all scientific research. I will continue in secret. A human was trying to save my kind?" Day asked, his mental voice confused. "It looks that way," Gia said, flipping through more pages. "The journal belongs to someone named Dr. Park. He was studying the river water and found a dragon egg. Instead of reporting it, he built this lab to try to hatch it. Where is this Dr. Park now?" Gia checked the final entries. The last entry is from 2 weeks before the evacuation. He was worried about being discovered. He writes that he was going to try to take the hatchling with him when the colony evacuated, but... She trailed off, reading the final lines. "If I cannot take it, I have programmed the lab to maintain optimal conditions indefinitely. The solar power should last for years. I pray someone finds this place before it's too late." Day moved to the tank, placing one clawed foot gently against the glass. The tiny dragon inside swam toward him, pressing against the barrier between them. "It recognizes you," Gia said softly. "Yes," Day replied. "It knows its kind." Gia checked the equipment monitoring the tank. "The systems are working perfectly. Temperature, water quality, everything is exactly as it should be. But Day, it can't stay in there forever. It needs to grow to learn how to be a dragon." "It needs to come home," Day agreed. "To the caverns where it belongs. Can we move it safely?" Gia asked, examining the tank. "We'd need to keep it in water during the journey." "There are containers in my home that could hold it," Day said. "Crystal vessels that once carried our young between nesting sites." Gia nodded. "Then let's take it home. And let's take all of Dr. Park's research too. It might help us understand how to find and save more eggs if there are any." As they carefully prepared to transport the hatchling, Gia felt a new sense of purpose filling her. They had come looking for information to help save the planet. But they had found something even more precious, hope for Day's kind. "You're not the last anymore," she said to Day, smiling up at the massive dragon. Through their mental link, she felt his joy, pure and powerful, like sunlight breaking through clouds after a long storm. "No," Day agreed, watching the tiny hatchling swim in circles. "Thanks to one human who cared enough to act, I am not the last. And thanks to another," his golden eyes turned to Gia. "My kind may have a future after all." 5 months had passed since Gia and Day found the dragon hatchling. They named him Min, meaning quick in Gia's language because he darted through water faster than the eye could follow. Now Min lived in a special pool in the main cavern, growing stronger each day. Gia sat cross-legged beside the pool, watching Min swim in lazy circles. He was much larger now, about the size of a small dog. His wings were developing nicely and he could lift himself out of the water for short periods. "He's trying to fly again," Gia called to Day, who was arranging crystals on the far side of the cavern. "Too soon," Day replied through their mental link. "His wings are not yet strong enough." Gia smiled as Min splashed back into the water after a failed attempt to stay airborne. "He's stubborn, like someone else I know. Day made a rumbling sound that Gia recognized as laughter. Over the months, their bond had grown deeper. They could share not just words but images and feelings across their mental connection. Gia had never felt so understood, so accepted, but beneath their daily life ran a current of tension. The mining company would return soon. According to the colony records, they were due in less than a month. Gia checked her tablet, where she had compiled all their research and plans. They had been busy these past months exploring the planet, mapping pollution zones and testing the special mineral-rich water from the northern valley. The results were promising. When applied to contaminated soil, the water neutralized many of the mining chemicals. Plants began to grow again in treated areas. Gia had successfully identified the key elements in the water and created a concentrated solution that could be spread more easily. "It's time to check the warning system," she said. Standing up and stretching, Day nodded. "I will come with you." Together, they walked through the cavern to a room Gia had converted into a monitoring station. Screens lined the walls, showing views from cameras they had placed at strategic locations around the planet. Most importantly, they had installed sensors in orbit that would detect approaching ships. Gia checked each system carefully. "Everything's working. No sign of ships yet." "Good," Day said. "But they will come. We must be ready." Their plan was both simple and complex. They couldn't stop the mining company by force. 2 dragons and a human girl against a fleet of ships and armed workers would be no contest. Instead, they aimed to use the law against the company. Gia had studied the galactic mining regulations carefully. There were 2 ways to stop a mining operation legally. Prove it would cause catastrophic environmental damage, or prove the planet contained sentient native life. They had evidence for both. "Let's review the presentation one more time," Gia suggested, pulling up the files on her tablet. She had created a detailed report showing how the mining chemicals had already damaged large portions of Nexus 7. Maps, soil samples, water tests, all carefully documented. She had also included Dr. Park's research on the dragons, proving they were intelligent, sentient beings who had lived on the planet for thousands of years before humans arrived. "Do you think it will be enough?" she asked Day. "Not for the first time. Truth has power," Day replied. "Whether they choose to respect that power is another matter." Gia nodded. She knew their plan had risks. The mining company might ignore the evidence. They might try to capture the dragons for study or profit. They might simply remove Gia and proceed with their operation. But it was the best plan they had. A sudden beeping from the main console interrupted their thoughts. Gia rushed to check it, her heart pounding. "Ships," she said, her voice tight. 3 of them just entered the system. "They'll reach Nexus 7 in about 6 hours. Day's golden eyes narrowed. "Sooner than expected?" "We need to get to the colony," Gia said, already gathering her equipment. "Set up the presentation in the main hall before they land." They had prepared for this moment. Gia had a small room ready at the colony, with all their evidence arranged for maximum impact. The plan was to meet the mining team as they arrived, present their case immediately, before they could start any operations. Gia packed her tablet, sample cases, and the special communicator she had built to translate Day's thoughts into audible speech for others to hear. Min would stay safely hidden in the cavern, protected by automatic systems Gia had installed. "Be good while we're gone," she told the young dragon, who splashed his tail in response. An hour later, they were flying toward the colony. Gia wore the protective suit she had modified from colony supplies, designed to shield her from the harsh sun and potential chemicals. Day flew swiftly, his powerful wings carrying them through the sky faster than any human vehicle could travel. The colony came into view, still abandoned and silent. They landed in the main yard, and Gia quickly went to work setting up their presentation in the largest building. "The ships will land there," she said, pointing to the old landing pad. "We'll wait inside until they arrive, then go out to meet them." Day nodded, his large body barely fitting through the widest doors of the building. "I will remain partially hidden at first. Let them see you alone initially. A human face may make them more willing to listen." Gia agreed with this strategy. The sight of a dragon might cause panic or aggressive reactions. Better to ease them into the full truth. As they waited, Gia felt her stomach twist with nerves. So much depended on the next few hours. Not just her future in Days, but the fate of an entire planet and a nearly extinct species. "Are you afraid?" Day asked gently through their link. "Yes," Gia admitted, but not like before. This is different. This matters. You matter, Day corrected. Never forget that. Whatever happens today, you have already done more than most humans ever would. You chose to help rather than harm. Gia smiled up at her dragon friend. We both did. The distant roar of engines broke the silence. Gia checked the monitors she had set up. 3 ships were descending toward the landing pad, larger and more advanced than the colony ships had been. They're here, she said, taking a deep breath. Remember the plan. I go out first. You stay hidden until I signal. I remember, Dee assured her. Be careful, small one. Gia walked out of the building and across the yard toward the landing pad. The ships touched down one after another, kicking up clouds of dust. She stood her ground, waiting as the dust settled. The main ship's ramp lowered. A group of people in company uniforms walked down, led by a tall man with gray hair and a stern expression. They stopped when they saw Gia standing alone in their path. Who are you? The leader called out. This is private property. Gia stepped forward, standing straight and tall despite her small size. My name is Gia Kim. I was left behind when the colony evacuated 6 months ago. The man's expression changed to one of surprise. The claim marker, child? You're still alive. Gia felt anger flash through her at being called a claim marker, but she kept her voice steady. Yes, I'm alive, and I have important information for you before you begin any mining operations. The man looked suspicious but motioned for his team to follow as he approached Gia. I'm Director Choi. What information? Please come with me, Gia said, turning toward the main building. I've prepared a presentation. Director Choi hesitated, then nodded. Very well, but make it quick. We have a schedule to keep. Gia led the group into the building where she had set up her evidence. Screens showed maps of the planet highlighting damaged areas. Sample cases displayed contaminated soil next to treated soil with new plant growth. Dr. Park's research was arranged neatly on one table. What is all this? Director Choi asked, looking around with a frown. Evidence, Gia replied. Evidence that your mining operation has already caused severe damage to this planet. And evidence that Nexus 7 is home to a sentient native species protected under galactic law. The director laughed. A sentient species? The surveys showed no intelligent life here. The surveys were wrong, Gia said firmly. And I can prove it. She pressed a button on her tablet. The screens changed to show Dr. Park's footage of dragon eggs and hatchlings. Then she activated the communicator device. You can come in now, she said. The back wall of the room seemed to shimmer, then part like water. Day stepped through, his massive body filling the space, golden eyes fixed on the mining team. Gasps and shouts filled the room. Several people reached for weapons. Director Choi stumbled backward, his face pale. What is that thing? He demanded. I am Day. The dragon's thoughts came through the communicator in a deep, resonant voice. This is my world. My kind lived here for thousands of years before humans came. The mining team stared in shock. Gia stepped forward again. Under Galactic Mining Regulation 42B, any planet with sentient native life is protected from exploitation, she said, her voice clear and confident. And under Environmental Protection Act 17, any mining operation that causes catastrophic damage to a planet's ecosystem must be immediately halted. Director Choi seemed to recover his composure. One creature doesn't prove sentient native life, and our operation is fully approved by the Galactic Mining Authority. Based on false information, Gia countered. You never reported finding dragon eggs during your surveys. Dr. Park's research proves you knew they existed. She pointed to the evidence on the table. And we have more than one dragon. We have proof of a surviving hatchling, and potential evidence of more eggs in remote regions. Day moved forward, his head lowering to look directly at Director Choi. Your chemicals killed my kind, poisoned our breeding grounds, destroyed our home. This stops now. The director's face hardened. This changes nothing. We have our permits. We have our orders. One child and a talking lizard won't stop a multi-billion credit operation. Gia had expected this response. She pressed another button on her tablet. Then perhaps this will. I'm now broadcasting everything in this room to the Galactic Council Environmental Division. They're receiving all our evidence, including your response to it. Director Choi's face went from hard to furious. You're bluffing. There's no way you could establish that kind of communication link. Dragon technology, Gia said simply. Far more advanced than you might think. Day's people had interstellar communication long before humans left Earth. This was stretching the truth, but the bluff worked. Uncertainty crossed the director's face as he looked from Jia to Day and back again. Even if what you say is true, he said finally, the company won't just walk away. There's too much invested here. We're not asking you to walk away, Jia replied. We're offering an alternative. She brought up new images on the screens, the mineral-rich water from the northern valley, the test results showing its unique properties. This is what you should be mining, she explained. The sacred water, as Day's people call it. It contains rare elements found nowhere else in the galaxy, and it can be harvested sustainably without destroying the planet. Director Choi studied the data with narrowed eyes. These readings, if accurate, this material would be worth 10 times what we came for. And harvesting it would require minimal equipment, minimal staff, Jia continued. Lower costs, higher profits, and no violation of galactic law. She could see the calculations happening behind the director's eyes. Profit versus risk, money versus legal trouble. We would need to verify these findings, he said finally. Of course, Jia agreed. Send your scientists to the Northern Valley. Test everything. But no heavy equipment, no drilling, no chemicals. Just research for now. Director Choi looked at his team, then back at Day, who remained imposingly present. Very well. Research only until we verify your claims. Jia felt relief wash through her but kept her expression serious, and recognition of Day's people as the native sentient species of Nexus 7, with all legal protections that entails. The director hesitated, then nodded. If the evidence supports it, yes. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a start. Jia knew the battle wasn't over. There would be more negotiations, more challenges. But they had won this first crucial confrontation. As the mining team filed out to return to their ships and report to company headquarters, Director Choi paused at the door. You're a remarkable young woman. Jia Kim, he said, his tone difficult to read. The company was wrong to leave you behind. Jia looked up at Day, then back at the director. No, she said quietly. They weren't. If they hadn't abandoned me here, I would never have found where I truly belong. The director left without another word. Through their mental link, Jia felt Day's pride and affection washing over her. We did it, she said, leaning against the dragon's warm side. The first step of many, Day replied. But yes, small one. We did it. Together they walked out into the sunlight. Above them, the mining ships were taking off, returning to orbit to await new orders. The wasteland stretched around them, damaged but not beyond healing. And somewhere in the mountains a young dragon waited for their return. Jia looked up at her dragon guardian and smiled. She had been abandoned, left alone to die on a hostile planet. But in that abandonment she had found something precious. A friend, a protector, a purpose. Day's wing curled around her, sheltering her from the harsh sun. In that moment Jia knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be.